school night to come and hear of what we have to share and why we want to serve on the Denver School Board. My name is Lisa Flores, and I'm a candidate for Denver School Board representing District 5, which covers North, West, and Central Denver. I'm running because I want to ensure that every child in Denver gets the very best education possible. I know firsthand that schools can change lives. I know because it happened to me. When I was a little girl, I moved around too much. I was raised by a single mother who was young herself, and between preschool and at the time that I finished high school, I had gone to 14 different schools. Yes, 14. I landed in a DPS high school. It was at this school that a group of teachers took it upon themselves to raise money to help send me to college. They saw promise in me, and if it weren't for their extraordinary care and concern, I'm not sure that I would have become the first in my family to graduate from college. Since then, I have worked professionally with a variety of schools: public, private, and nonprofit charter. That experience gave me a close-up look at our educational system. What I saw in that system was a system that worked in some places and failed in others. What I saw was large achievement gaps, an uneven core of school leadership, and polarization, especially in our community. And I believe deeply that we as a community could do better. And so I decided to run. I want to work on closing those achievement gaps. I want to work for us to better, on better recruiting, training, supporting, and retaining our quality leaders. And I want to help heal our community and bring it together. Two concepts will help me do this: collaboration and imagination. About collaboration, we all know how easy it is to point out problems. I'm more focused, and my interest and concern is how do we come together to solve those problems? And about imagination, let's use our best imagination to maximize our strengths and better improve our neighborhood schools. Collaboration and imagination, they've worked for me throughout my career in public service. Most recently, I was the senior program officer for the Gates Family Foundation. At Gates, I had the opportunity to travel and visit a variety of schools throughout the metro region, actually in 12 different districts. And what I saw in those districts was really a multitude of programs. I had an opportunity to visit schools that were both traditional district schools, expeditionary learning schools. I saw a multitude of charter schools, a variety of models, and those private schools, some that were paying high tuition, but also some that were serving very low-income communities. Before that, I worked with Mayor Hickenlooper. I spent lots of time, actually, it was the early days of the Denver preschool program, helping to set that up. I also worked too on homelessness and alternatives to sentencing. In that role, what I often did was help bring people together that didn't always work well with one another. And sometimes too, people that actually weren't even invited often to sit at the table. And it was actually my job and my role to make sure that they had a place and that they had a voice and that together we worked through and found common sense solutions. Before that, I was the executive director of Denver Intercity Parish and Mikasa Resource Center for Women, both organizations located in District 5. Collaboration and imagination. As I've shared, they've worked for me throughout my career. I ask for your vote in November, and I promise that I will do everything in my power to ensure that every child receives the best education possible. Thank you.
So I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I hope you have a moment to talk to the Lake IB staff. I think we've got a really good thing going here. My name is Michael Kiley. I am running for school board. I thought I'd share a little about why I'm running and then talk about some of my core values. First and foremost, I'm running because I'm a proud DPS parent. My son goes to Edison Elementary, and my daughter goes to Skinner Middle School. And if I was to be elected, I might be the only school board member with kids in a neighborhood school. And second, I'm running because I'm a product of public schools, as is my wife. And we really believe that we have had success as citizens and in our career because of that important experience. And third, I believe I understand what it takes to strengthen our neighborhood schools. I know what it takes to partner with talented teachers and strong principals and the community to work to improve a school for all children. Last year I was the Edison PTA president, and I was very proud that we set a record for enrollment, but I'm equally proud because we made progress in increasing the diversity of participation. Prior to that, I was a parent leader that rallied over 1,000 of my fellow community members and parents to support North High School and it getting back on track and restoring its place in our community. And prior to that, and perhaps most important for me, is my experience with Skinner Middle School. And I was a parent leader. We rallied hundreds of parents to lobby hard to get the resources that Skinner needed to keep it from being closed in 2009. We restored honors programs, Spanish, other world languages. We had extracurriculars. And most importantly, we committed our children to go to Skinner. And today I'm very proud to say that Skinner has a wait list. And I want to build on those successes to strengthen our neighborhood schools in every part of what is District 5, the school board district in North and West Denver. I know there's not any quick fix. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. It takes all of us working together on behalf of all of our children so that they have a quality option that's close to home. And we have to be realistic that when the district has tried to do it alone, they've not been successful. It's only when the district partners with the community and the parents that we have had success. So if I'm your school board representative, I'm going to be guided by these values. First, there are no failing schools. There are schools that the district has failed. Second, every child deserves the opportunity, not only for a quality academic experience, but music, athletics, language, the arts. Those are the opportunities I had in public school. I played piano, I played soccer, I sang in choir, I learned Spanish somewhat. Third, we need more resources in the classroom. We need to reduce the size of our administration and give more resources to our schools. And I'm worried that we're losing control of our schools, of our child's education, and our tax dollars as charter school chains seek to expand at the expense of our neighborhood schools. Fourth, I believe that every neighborhood must have a school with a boundary. Every child must have a neighborhood school close to home with a guaranteed seat. I believe charters are an important option, but they are a choice. Right now, in the guise of choice, parents are asked to rank their schools, their preferred schools 1 through 5, and that reduces our public schools to a lottery. And it shouldn't come down to luck or a lottery. So I want to thank you again for coming out, and I look forward to the conversation.
All right. These are the next two questions come from the North Denver Tribune. They are specific to each candidate. I'll start with Ms. Flores. I have heard you say in public forums that it is time to put students first. When I hear students first, I understand this to be a call for diminished unions in public schools and the increase of non-union charter schools. The National Student First organization is where I get this understanding. Please explain what you mean when you use the term students first, and share with us your thoughts on whether or not unions get in the way of putting students first.
It's interesting that you had asked that question. When I do talk about putting students first, it actually, in my mind, has nothing to do with unions. It really has everything to do with children. And I think actually what comes to mind more for me has actually been some of the polarization that we've had in our community. I have felt for several years, probably at least 6 or 7 years, that our community has been exceptionally divided. We have been, instead of really looking at how our schools are serving kids, we've been pitted in this discussion that's pitted traditional schools against charter schools or different educational models. And instead, I really feel like the conversation should be less about governance models and a lot more about, is this a quality seat for kid? The other part of that too is just in terms of accountability across the board, and this is again not about the union for me, but it's about accountability, both again for district schools and charter schools. It's an interesting thing actually on that is that with this charter school discussion, Denver Public Schools has actually closed more charter schools than the rest of the state combined. And part of that, again, has come back to making sure that those are good quality seats for kids. That's what I'm concerned about.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Kiley, your slogan, Strong Neighborhood Schools. Please explain to our audience the role strong neighborhood charter schools play in the mix of choices for students. And will you look at charter schools as neighborhood schools?
So when I talk about a neighborhood school, it's a school with a boundary, with a guaranteed seat nearby to home. It's a school that offers a wide range of programs: music, honors, world language, athletics, the arts. There's no application, there's no lottery. Everyone gets in if they choose to go there. Now, I think charters, innovation, alternative, they're a great opportunity to innovate. And I look to the original vision of a charter school being teachers and the parents realizing that they could do better and choosing to work together to offer an option. What I don't think was ever the intent was for more of a corporate model to be incorporated, where growth was one of the goals, where a school was approved before it had a location, and then it left the charter to wait for a neighborhood school to be closed in order for that school to open. And that is really the distinction that I feel we have between the vision of a charter or innovation or alternative and where DPS has pulled us. I don't believe they're in competition. They shouldn't be in competition, because I think if we had a quality neighborhood option in every part of Denver, I think there's a pretty consistent number that comes up about 65% of the parents choose to go there. About 65% of the kids go to East that live in Boundary. About 65% go to Skinner that live in Boundary. And to me, that's the process working. When it doesn't work is when we leave parents like, is what's going on currently in Sunnyside. We ask them to enter a lottery and hope they can get into the right school for their child. The lottery is not the promise of public education, in my opinion.
Thank you very much.
We'll now start some of the community questions. You'll each have 2 minutes to respond to the questions. The first one is, do you believe a majority of our students in our city's schools are receiving an equitable education in the current state of DPS? And outline how you personally measure educational equity, and given the many different communities within District 5, how will you navigate the needs of low-income, upper-income, English language learners, and special needs families in Northwest Denver? Start with you, Lisa.
3 times in a row. I think the first question that you asked was, do I believe the majority of students are receiving a quality education? I am very much focused on District 5, which, as you all know, includes the low-income housing projects of Sun Valley. It includes West High School. It includes Globeville, Swansea, Elyria, Clayton, and as well as Berkeley and Highlands and Jefferson Park. And I would say, in terms of really looking at District 5, are all of our kids receiving a quality education? I think we have a long way to go still in terms of really ensuring equity across the board. I think there are still differences depending on what zip code you live in. In terms of actually how do you measure that, I have been somebody who actually does look at CDE data. Colorado Department of Education actually posts data on reading, writing, math scores. And looking at 3-year trends, it's actually something that I've used when I've gone to visit a school principal and been able to start a conversation with them, and really kind of on both ends of the conversation to be able to say, gosh, your writing scores are rocking it. You know, what's happening here? What's working? What curriculum are you using? What's going on? That there's usually a narrative and a story that's tied with that. And conversely, is that sometimes there's some challenges that are going on in that school as well. I think that's the good starting point to having that conversation. I also know that there are some very effective programs that I've been a part of in bringing to Denver, into Colorado, that are helping to close that achievement gap.
So I think this is an important difference between Lisa and me. As a parent of DPS kids, I was concerned when I read, she said in an article that District 5 is aflame. And I asked myself, don't you have to have kids in the school to know? Don't you have to be in the building and be experiencing what the kids are experiencing? I mean, I think parents are in the best position to judge the quality of our schools, at least our own children's schools. And furthermore, we've had 10 years of this so-called reform. And if Lisa really believes that our schools are aflame, then aren't the 6 members of the school board majority to blame? And if the board has failed our schools, then I think there's the story, because this same board majority has endorsed Lisa. So here's what I really believe, that we have some really good schools in Northwest Denver. And we need to double down, and we need to invest more in these schools. We need to recognize that they've got a culture that's working, a principal that's partnering with the community. We need to shift resources away from a bloated administration And we need to bring those resources into the classroom. We need to shift the resources away from an expensive and ineffective testing regime, and we need to put those resources into the classroom.
All right, this time Mr. Kiley goes first. All right. Skinner is used as a model for strong neighborhood middle school. What role does the increase of economically advantaged students play in Skinner's success? And given the differences in the economics throughout our District 5, can this middle school model be broadly replicated and scaled with the economic and racial diversity throughout the middle schools in District 5?
So first let me say that the opportunity gap that we face in our schools is daunting. Half of our parents don't make a living wage, and yet they're expected to make sure those kids arrive every day ready to learn. Now, I'm not saying they don't have a responsibility to do that, but we have to recognize the difficulty. So bringing it specific to Skinner, Skinner has done an admirable job of first bringing a more diverse population into the school. Skinner is 75% kids of color. The neighborhood is 50-50. So I think Skinner is an integration success story. Second, it uses a mix of programs to engage the students. An engaged student is much more likely to be excited about learning, to embrace a passion for learning. And I don't know this firsthand. I learned this working with principals over the last 7 years. I've learned this from them. An engaged student is critical, whether it be chess club, cross country, whatever it may be. The second thing, when I look at Skinner, I see is a very talented principal who mentored talented assistant principals and mentored and attracted and retained talented teachers, which was essential, a continuity of staff. DPS is a 22% turnover rate in our teachers. Skinner has avoided that by and large, and that's what we need to bring to the other schools in the district. We need to replicate this. It doesn't mean a carbon copy of Skinner, but it means the right principal partnering with the community and retaining and attracting and mentoring talented teachers.
I actually want to go back to something that Mr. Kiley had said earlier about, actually it felt just a bit personal in terms of that perhaps I haven't experienced what it is to be a parent in a school. My husband and I are helping to raise my nephew. He's a second grader at Brown Elementary. I volunteer in his class. I actually know very well several of the teachers, the principal, they know me by name, the kids know me by name, and give me hugs when I see them on the playground. I feel like I actually have a really good sense of what it is to be in that parent role. The other part of it too, I guess, that I wanted to say about that is that I know that my family doesn't look like a traditional family, but I also think in terms of DPS, there's a lot of families that don't necessarily fit that traditional model, and that's one of the reasons that I try and be actually very cognizant, very, very purposeful with my language, and I say parents, guardians, grandparents, because I think we make family in a lot of different ways. About Skinner in particular, and about its ability to be replicated. I've had an opportunity to visit with Michelle Koyama on a few occasions, and she and Nicole Veltzi before her, two of the best principals that the district has to offer. They've done a phenomenal job of both recruiting and retaining top-notch teaching staff. The parent engagement that we see there, phenomenal. It also too receives more revenue per pupil than the other schools in the region. I'm not sure that Other communities don't necessarily have that strength, don't have those same resources, and that's what I'm concerned is how do we bring that to Green Lake? How do we bring that to Swansea?
Who's getting the next question? Flores. Okay, you're up again, Ms. Flores. DPS has been moving towards shared enrollment zones, stating the strategy promotes diversity and open access to higher performing schools. The enrollment zone system now means that students may be placed in traditional or charter schools. For families who wish to stay in the neighborhood, is it fair that they do not have a true choice for selecting programs that suit their students' needs? Do you believe that all students in DPS should have the opportunity to attend a traditional public school, or is it okay to have a lottery decide that a student must attend a charter school?
I don't believe that any parent should be forced to send their kid to a school that they don't want to. I don't believe, so I do believe in strong neighborhood schools. But what I believe is that we need to do a better job of improving the quality of education in all of those neighboring schools. Right now in District 5, over 50% of the families that are in the Skinner North feeder pattern are choicing out. Part of what that says to me is that families aren't finding what they need and want. How can we do a better job of lifting up all schools? How can we focus some of our attention and resources here on Lake Middle School to make sure that's a favored option as well? I feel like we have gotten really stuck in a conversation around Skinner and we're losing focus on the broader picture, actually. And again, part of that is how do we lift up Bryant Webster? How do we lift up Lake? How do we make sure that there's better and more options for our families?
The enrollment zone is not what the community wants. It's not what the parents want. It's a stepping stone to getting rid of all boundaries entirely. We are detaching the school from the community. Our schools bind our communities together. And I know our working families more than anyone else. Transportation is a major issue, and they must send their kids to the school that's closest to home, or go through great effort otherwise. So I am categorically opposed to enrollment zones. We have some great charter schools. I toured Gals recently. I was very impressed with it. We've got Justice High School doing very important work with kids who are dealing with unbelievably difficult life challenges. But those schools should be a choice. And no one should ever be assigned to a charter school. It should be a choice. And I will fight this every opportunity I get.
How much time will you give a school to improve? And this goes to Mr. Kiley first. What will your objective and subjective criteria be to determine if a school should be given more time to improve or if it should be replaced with a different program or model? What meaningful community engagement techniques will you use to choose replacements?
This is a huge topic. I could go on all night about this, and I would begin with the end in mind, college and career. And I'd ask everyone here tonight to think about your career and what's made you successful. If you've been unsuccessful, raise your hand, please. Thank you for your honesty. How many of the factors that make you successful can be measured on a test? Now, we all acknowledge we need standards, and we need to know that our kids can do math and read and such. But we need to understand that the test is the beginning and not the end. So when I look at a school, I would look for the right principal, who has an authentic and real and productive partnership with the parents and the community. And when I say community, I mean the people that have chosen to go to that school and the ones that haven't. The entire community. I would look at the turnover rate in the school. I would look at the experience level of the teachers in the school. I would look at the mix of the program offerings in the school. I would look at how many certified teachers are in the school. I would factor in all of those things. And a test score, whether it be good or bad, would be the beginning of the conversation and not the end. It wouldn't be a reason to rip a school out of a community and turn it upside down. It would be a reason to double down. If we have the right principal, we need to put more resources in and not less. Colfax Elementary needs more resources, not less. Garden Place needs more resources, not less. Brian Webster needs more resources, not less. And I know this because I've been in the building. I met with the principal, I've talked to the parents, and I know they're headed in the right direction. They need more resources.
So there's certainly strong indicators that tell us that a school is struggling. Again, high teacher attrition, decreased student enrollment. I had the opportunity to serve on a hiring committee for a new principal at West High School, West Generation. And I sat through 2 full days of interviews. And at the end of that second day, I can tell you there were 3 candidates that I had seen some promise in, and I thought maybe they would be great candidates for assistant principal. But quite frankly, no one that I thought was ready for that principal leadership role. And it's one of those things where I put kind of that experience in contrast to the success that you've seen at Skinner Middle School. And like, what happens actually when a school is struggling and doesn't have kind of that same quality of leadership or that same investment from the teachers? And it's an interesting thing too. I actually was just visiting with a principal, I mean not a principal, a teacher from Greenlee Elementary just this weekend. And she had shared with me that, as difficult as it was, she had said, you know, I think a year or 2 ago, I probably would have voted for school closure. But without that school closure put in place, they actually hit the restart button with a new principal, with an incredible infrastructure, one that again was supporting them with a new program that was really helping the professional development of their teachers, really providing additional curriculum for them to pull on, and that school is really gone through an incredible turnaround. So in those 2 experiences, part of me is saying we need to actually see what resources are available to that school, but we also need to see too what the teachers are saying, what the community is saying, and do they have the vision for what's next? I think it's really important that we really be mindful of what the community is saying for those schools.
It's a perfect segue into community engagement. A large number of constituents are concerned with DPS efforts to engage stakeholders. Some volatile examples include meetings to discuss the Tre Vista Middle School closure, the fate of the Smedley building, and co-location of different school models in one building. What does meaningful community engagement mean to you, and what will you do to ensure that it happens? Describe your experiences working with diverse populations in a community context to reach consensus. Lisa?
Well, I think probably everyone in this room can agree that Denver Public Schools failed miserably with the community process that took place with Tre Vista, with Skinner. And I'm saying that regardless of what you think about the outcome, and I think there's a variety of opinions that are here, but I think what we can all agree is that the anger and the tension that was fed in that process was not healthy. So in terms of leading a better process, I think one of the things that needs to happen is that we need to be more transparent. I should say that the district needs to be more transparent in terms of how they share their information, and that we as a community really need to come together and do a better job of listening to one another. I think that sometimes we close ourselves off to folks that aren't necessarily thinking and feeling like we do. And it's important, I think, to really open ourselves up and really hear and listen to what other folks are looking for, both for their students and for their community. Was there a second part to that question? What else?
Describe your experience working with diverse populations in that context.
Well, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. That was certainly experience working with diverse populations. But I really actually would think the time that I would really pull on most is when I was a senior advisor to Mayor Hickenlooper. They were building a new Justice Center, and part of that task was really looking at alternative to sentencing, diversion, community reentry. And in that experience, really pulled together public defenders, district court judges, DA's office, folks that didn't, again, traditionally work well with one another, but I think everyone around that table was really happy with the solutions that we came to. And I'm very proud of that work.
So, community engagement with DPS is a corporate model whereby decisions made behind the scenes are sold. And the taxpayers' money is spent as DPS sells solutions back to us. Somewhere around $2 million that we could sure use someplace else. So Lisa and I have very different experience, I think, in this area. I think back to when I was a parent leader as a volunteer. I put hundreds of hours into rallying support for North High School. First, as a member of the committee that ultimately selected Principal Velsay to lead that school. And second, to navigate a very combative, heated conversation in the community where DPS was stoking the fire rather than putting it out. But that's okay. We got through it anyway as a community. I was part of the parent leadership that pulled together a working group to negotiate the co-location at North. And that was a very difficult process as parents from North and from Strive negotiated how they were going to find a win-win, putting the kids' needs from both schools first. And I think the parents and the principals that were in the room set the model that the district should be following in terms of how to do real constructive parent engagement, put the parties in the room and let them work together without sales, without manipulation, an authentic process to collaborate together on behalf of our kids.
Thank you very much. All right, question is about charter school finances, and it goes to Mr. Kiley first. Charter schools are public schools. They differ, however, in their lack of published salary schedules, income, and expenditures. If you are elected to the board, how will you increase the financial transparency of charter schools?
So charter schools are private organizations that receive tax dollars, and they educate our children on behalf of the community and the parents that choose to send their kids there. We have some charters that are barely making ends meet. They are struggling every single day. We have other charter schools that have more of a corporate model, where it's much harder to understand what their finances really are. And I'll get into it briefly. What they do is they form a management organization, which is independent from the nonprofit organization that operates the school. The management organization receives a single management fee. We don't know how that money's being used, and we have no public right to it. So my cause in this area would be pretty simple. No management organizations. Or you must fully disclose how every dollar is spent. You must itemize the tenure of your teachers and whether they're certified. And every salary must be clearly identified. Outside funding must be clearly identified. And the purpose here is to, as has been said, trust but verify. Again, we've got charters that are doing important work, but this is taxpayer dollars that are being spent, and it must be fully disclosed how they're being spent so that we can, as a community and as parents, judge whether it's delivering the value that was promised.
So, in terms of the transparency, I think there's definitely some steps that the board can take in terms of making those financial records more accessible. There's a few points that I wanted to clarify, though, just to share kind of better information. And just as a reminder, I've spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector, and nonprofit and public service sector, so I know nonprofits very well. So first of all, while there are some for-profit models, the City and County of Denver does not have a single for-profit charter school. They are 100% operated by nonprofits. So, and that actually includes too the Charter Management Organization, which quite frankly, those have been created in a sense to do, have some efficiencies around principal training and teacher preparation. So because those are nonprofit organizations, it's the same as, gosh, accessing financial records for the Girl Scouts or the Boys and Girls Club, is that it takes nothing. You can call and request any of those records, and quite frankly, most of them, and I think as all these charter schools included, post all of that financial information on their websites. So in terms of that transparency, I think that's we could further enhance that, but again, many of those records are available now. There was one other piece that I actually heard you say something, Kylie, about teacher tenure, and it's just to remember that the teacher licensure is actually the same that we require for all private schools. It's the same way, the same regulation.
Thank you. Lisa, we'll start with you again on this. We're going to speak about the budget and describe the DPS budget shortfalls and areas of greatest need as you understand it. Do you think there could be more efficiency in DPS central budgeting that would put more money into school hands and less into administration?
There's certainly some areas that that I think that we can further enhance. So in 2012, I actually was one of the 4 co-chairs that worked on designing the bond mill levy, worked with a large group of community leaders from across City and County of Denver that was very much focused on bringing additional dollars to both for capital needs and for operation. And so very cognizant of some of the weaknesses and where we need additional dollars. I would say technology is definitely one of those areas where we need to enhance in all schools the availability. I've also been hearing from parents, guardians, grandparents, the struggle that they're having to, and sometimes navigating the system on behalf of their kids with special needs. I think that's another area that we need to put additional focus on. And the other one too that is I just hear repeatedly is actually paraprofessionals. and just, how undervalued and little pay they get. Tied with that, of course, is our teachers. We need to do a better job of compensating our teachers. Teachers matter. Teachers make all the difference. Those would be two things. I know that I've actually heard the other candidates speak a bit on finance before, and I know that sometimes he compounds both capital budget with general operating, and really want to make sure that we're making that distinction when we talk about the two. So I think I've given you a couple areas that when I am your board representative, areas that I would focus on, and I have to stop.
We have an immense opportunity to shrink the administration and drive those dollars into the classroom, and we have an immense need. We underpay our teachers $22,000 a year on average compared to Cherry Creek schools. We have 22% turnover, and the two have got to be related. So there is a fierce urgency of now to fix this. Now, I've been in the corporate world for 25 years. I know the difference between capital and operating. But I will tell you, both of them come from your pocket and mine. So how we slice and dice it from an accounting point of view doesn't really matter. When we spent $60 million on a new administration building that I opposed, it affected the money that we had left over for Garden Place, whose classrooms get to 120 degrees. Now, can we get our heads around the fact that Garden Place needs a better solution than what it's got? Can we get our heads around the fact that the neighborhood center at Skinner shouldn't charge an admission fee because it's trying to serve a clientele that doesn't have the money to begin with? Why are we doing that? Why do we have teachers with 35 kids in the classroom? Why do we have special needs teachers with over 20 kids in a classroom? The math here is real, and it is clear. Over $11,000 comes into the budget top line at DPS, and $5,300 makes it to the classroom. I'm going to hold the district accountable until every school has what it needs. We're going to take the dollars out of the administration and send it to the classroom.
This question goes to you, Mr. Kiley, first. Did you support the 2012 bond? Describe your involvement with the bond process and/or your reasons for opposition. Are you aware of how the amounts help specific schools in District 5?
The 2012 bond was very contentious. And it was very troublesome to me because we were not told the truth about how that money was to be spent. We were told repeatedly there was no plan to buy an administration building. Well, it turned out there was. Now, at the time, I believe that number was $47 million, somewhere around there. It's up to $60 million. And now they need to buy a parking garage because apparently they didn't get the memo that there's no parking downtown. So now they're buying a parking garage. So me and some other community activists said, look, the schools need money. We want a fair and open disclosure of how the money is really going to be spent. We want to put it on the next ballot. Because $60 million was way too much money to waste. And that's why I opposed the bond back in 2012. Now, once it passed, and I watched what happened, for example, to Valdez, who was promised much needed improvements to that school. And those improvements were taken away. And the Valdez families, Robert Speth, the Speths did an amazing job. They had to go fight for that money again. So I think that whole process here is telling. We are told repeatedly, the kids need the money, the kids need the money, and they do. But I'm not convinced that the board and the administration is acting as good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. And as a board member, I'm going to make sure that every single person in the administration shows their value to the kids in the classroom, or we're going to find them a different thing to do.
As I shared earlier, I was one of the 4 co-chairs that sat on the bond and mill levy and helping to design that. I can tell you in terms of the bond, the need far exceeds the amount of available dollars. The laundry list goes on. And it's just, it's even to the point where we're looking at deferred maintenance that we don't have the funds to be able to address. Much less building some of the new schools, especially in far northeast, where enrollment is skyrocketing. But specific to District 5, we have the lowest enrollment out of the 5 districts. And as a consequence, our district, actually, not just because of the low enrollment, but because our current representative too was also campaigning against the bond and the levy, we got a much lower share than the rest of the city in terms of our fair allocation. This is one of the things actually in terms of, when I am your board representative, I want to make sure that we have somebody in there that's really fighting to make sure that we get all the dollars that we need to improve our schools here in District 5, including Garden Place. In terms too of specific allocations, one of the things that I find particularly challenging is that we still do not have, we're still not paying for full day kindergarten, and we're having some of our families, they're actually needing to subsidize to enroll their kids in full day. The state only reimburses 68% for those kindergarten kids. I think that's something that we need to continue to work on, but one of the things I'm most proud of is bringing $13 million in mill levy funds to make sure that we increase access to early child education, and that's something that came through in that 2012 bond.
I think Lisa saw the notes first. We're going to talk about early childhood education, and you go first. Do you support the expansion of the Denver preschool program to give all students, regardless of income, access to early childhood education? If you do not support, what do you propose as a good alternative, and how would you fund it?
Great, I can pick up where I was leaving off, or where I had left off. So, very much support full funding for early childhood education. And let's be clear too, we know that early childhood education makes all the difference in helping to prepare our kids and have them be kindergarten ready. Quite frankly, I think it's sometimes arbitrary that we're starting our formal education with kids in kindergarten, especially when so much of the research shows how effective it can be when kids are receiving, again, high quality education when they're 3-4 years old. So yes, I support Denver preschool program. Yes, I support the the mill levy that again brought an additional $13 million into our classrooms. And I'd go further than that, and that's what I was starting to say, is that Amendment 66 that was put on the ballot in terms of school finance a few years ago, one of the elements in that measure was to provide full funding, 100% funding for our kindergarten kids. That did not pass. I think that's something that we should pick up again and really ensure that our kids are taken care of.
I think Lisa's absolutely right. I think the Denver preschool program has been an amazing success, and hats off to the taxpayers, to the city partnering with DPS to deliver this really important program. I referenced earlier that half of our families, they don't even make a living wage. And that means that these kids are missing out on an important opportunity that families with more resource, families like Lisa and me, can provide. So I think it's very important that we expand it. I've touched on earlier, I think there's some efficiencies with DPS that could drive some of the funding. I think once we demonstrate to the taxpayers that we are being very good stewards of their resources, I think they're going to open up their pocketbooks again. I think we also have to look at some legislative changes as well. We have to look at the reality of Tabor and how it gets in the way of us being able to invest properly in our education. One of my goals as a school board member is I'm not looking just for a vote, and I'm not looking just for an endorsement that looks good on an email. I'm looking for partners. And I've worked hard to cultivate that partnership 7 years as just a dad, working on behalf of our schools as a volunteer. And I think our elected representatives recognize that I'm authentic in what I'm trying to do. And I think that we've got some really important opportunities in this part of town to lead the way, to do some state level. And it takes a long time for them to trust them. And so those teachers above all, we've got to make sure that we're retaining them, that we're taking care of them, that we're giving them the resource they need. But in the end, from what I've heard, it's about student-teacher ratios and making sure that those kids receive the services that they're legally obligated to receive and morally obligated.
So this is something, special needs is now very dear to my heart. And it's actually something when I first declared that I wanted to represent you on in District 5 on the school board, I had some awareness of, but it wasn't honestly top of mind. It was actually as I spent more and more time talking to parents, guardians, grandparents, that if you listen closely, you hear the frustration. You hear the challenges that they've been facing. The parents that say, gosh, every time I walk into the school, I feel like that the school administration is saying, oh, here comes that troubled parent again. Here comes the troublemaker. I so empathize with that frustration that they're feeling. But one of the things that I actually wanted to point out and share too is that I think people sometimes have this notion or idea that special needs, special ed kids are still the ones that are in the back of the building in that special classroom that you sometimes pass by. And in this day and age, actually, those kids are very much integrated into the regular classroom, both morally and by federal legislation. Most of those kids, again, are integrated into the classroom. So it's one of those things too, where sometimes we feel like, gosh, that's not really my kid. Why do I really need to care about that? But the fact of the matter is that when those kids aren't being served, it doesn't affect just that child, it affects the whole classroom. So we really need to make sure that we are serving all children, all types of learners. I'll say one more thing in terms of like what I would do is that I've had an opportunity to speak actually again with a wide spectrum, and I'm asking them, what would you do? They've given me a long list of recommendations. And the interesting thing is that most of those recommendations don't actually cost money, but make a huge difference in terms of how they feel when they enter the classroom. Those are the kind of changes, those are the kind of conversations I want to have in helping special needs kids.
Mr. Cotton, you're starting this time, is that right? What performance measures and assessments do you believe are necessary to hold DPS and yourself accountable for school performance, particularly in regard to stable, consistent leadership and neighborhood strategy that includes attaining the SPF Denver Plan goal of 80% blue and green school seats by 2020, with only 38% in Northwest Denver now how will you be held accountable for the goal and its process?
That's a really important question because I think, again, I come from a private sector mentality, and that doesn't completely translate to public education, so I want to be careful about this. But one thing that I think is very much something I believe is that as you go up the chain of command, the accountability increases, not decreases. So when I think about being a board member and want to be held accountable, first and foremost, we're going to talk directly about proficiency. I'm not going to talk about colors. The colors is a DPS fabrication that I don't subscribe to. We're going to talk about proficiency. We're going to talk about growth. We're going to talk about tenure of teachers. We're going to talk about level of certification. We're going to talk about the turnover of principals, which, by the way, is at 30%. Those are the things that I'm going to be focused on. I'm going to give kudos to schools that choose to offer athletics and the arts and programs that aren't measured on a test, because those schools are serving, I think, a broader purpose to make sure that we have well-rounded people, well-rounded citizens, and not just kids that know how to take a test well. So those are the measures that I'm looking for, and I welcome being held accountable to those.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
So the question pulled out actually that goal of having an 80%, that every district in Denver Public Schools reach that benchmark, that 80% of the schools be high performing. In District 5, Northwest and Central Denver, right now we're at 38%. And so I won't use colors, I'll use those percentages instead. I think actually, it's a huge lift. It's a huge lift. I had shared with you earlier my experience in the hiring process for principal at West High School. I think it's fine to say, hey, let's lift them all up, but I think we actually have to take a step back and really talk about what is it going to take. And so for me, again, I come back time and time again to quality school leadership. We have to do a better job of recruiting great quality leaders, supporting them, and retaining those quality leaders too. Both West Generation and North High School are getting brand new school leaders, and I know this community is really sorry to see Nicole Veltzi go. In terms of that accountability, I think that there's an action plan that needs to be put into place, right? It's not enough to just keep saying this mantra of like, let's keep working, let's improve the schools. How are we going to get there? I think there's some great programs that we can pull on. I'm not afraid of being accountable. Quite frankly, I think this is about a larger community engagement process that includes not just those parents, teachers, educators, but also the parents and other business leaders as well, in terms of really making sure that we're pushing hard and have this sense of urgency in improving our schools.
Well, this is our last 2-minute question. You guys are a great audience. You have to understand I'm around 135 middle schoolers all day. You have been amazingly quiet and great and respectful. All right. This is about, so Mr. Flores, you go first. How will you work with other DPS board members to bring resources to Northwest Denver?
As it's been pointed out earlier, I have been endorsed by 6 of the 7 sitting board members. A lot of times people say that and say, oh, she's just that 7th vote. I am a strong woman who is not afraid to voice her opinion. Those folks that have endorsed me, I've actually had previous experience working with many of them. I served on several nonprofit boards, actually, with Ann Byrow, Happy Haynes, some of the others. They know what it looks like when we disagree, and they know that we can work through that as well. It's an interesting thing. When I first decided to run, previously I really felt that, I was very much a part of the city as a whole and vice versa. The city belonged to me and I belonged to the city. But in running, I have become so parochial. I am so invested in District 5 itself, in Sun Valley, in Swansea, in Jefferson Park, in Berkeley. And having those existing relationships and that support, I am going to work as hard as I can to both advocate, represent, and actually pull resources to District 5. That's what I'm about. I'm about serving this district.
So I get the question a lot, about Lisa and what's she like. And I say, she's a good person. She's done good work. I'm running against a 7-0 board. The other 6 board members, to my recollection, have never voted against the superintendent, not once. I don't think that serves the public interest. We need to have a robust debate. I think the city council is a pretty good model of that. You can disagree without being disagreeable. Now, frankly, it's going to be easier to negotiate with the board when I'm on the board, because over the last 7 years, I've been negotiating with the board as a dad. And we've had some pretty good success. We got almost $500,000 for Skinner. I think the board members, they respect authenticity. I have a lot of conversations with them one-on-one. I see a lot of opportunity when they see the goal is sincere and it's not personal. I think there's a lot of, shall we say, wiggle room. I'll give you one quick example. When I was getting ready to run again, I had coffee with several of the board members, and we talked about my concern about the caliber of the management immediately above the principals. We've got some good ones. And frankly, we've got some ones that I have no idea why they have that job. Frankly. And I saw an opportunity there to work with the board to up the game at that level of management. And I think that's just one opportunity, or one example of where I've worked well with the board.
All right. We are now entering the lightning round. This is a yes or no answer. So, if you had been on the board, would you have voted in favor of the new enrollment zone in Northwest Denver approved by the majority board last June?
No, and I was glad that, no.
I want to do the same thing. Yeah, yes, and
Thank you.
better community process.
Do you agree with Superintendent Tom Boasberg that broader enrollment zones instead of school boundaries will promote opportunity and equity within Northwest Denver? Lisa?
Yes.
No.
Do you support approving new charter schools without identifying where they will be located?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Do you think teachers should be licensed? Michael?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you support replacing district-run neighborhood schools with privately operated charter schools? Michael?
No.
Do we mean run by nonprofits?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you think the district is testing too much?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your work. Wrap And then after their wrap-up, we are going to invite any other candidates who are on the ballot to come up and speak. But right now, we would like to start with Lisa and have a 2-minute wrap-up. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 minute. She has a 1-minute elevator speech. What's your...
I hope that you found this discussion informative and enlightening. I think it reinforces for me, and hopefully for you too, that running a big public school system is both challenging and complex. I want you to remember 3 things about me. 1, I have lived the experience of most of our kids that are in these high poverty schools. 2 is that I have a knowledge base from which I can draw from and hit the ground running. I have a wide experience from a lot of different kinds of school models of what's working and what's not. 3 is that I have the experience in school-based and experience, skill-based, to really bring people together to solve problems. I'm not running for or against DPS. I'm running for our kids. I'm running to improve their school education. I believe I am the right person at the right time for this position, and I would like your vote. Thank you.
We've talked a lot about policy and positions, so I just thought I'd share a little about myself. I was very lucky to be born into the Combat and the Coyote families. Lived a bicultural life, and it feels at home for me to live in North Denver and be part of the greater West Denver area. My parents never really had a lot of money, but they always put us first. They never had luxuries for themselves. We went without a car for 4 years, but we always had money for cello lessons and soccer tournaments. And I think they got their values from their parents. My grandmother on the Campa side is Lucille Campa. She taught ballet folklorico. My grandfather on the Campa side was the head of the language department at DU. And on my father's side, my great-grandfather, Enos Mills, was the father of Rocky Mountain National Park. So I come from a family of educators, and I'm honored to continue in that tradition. I'm asking for partnership, not just your vote, but partnership. And together, we're going to deliver on the promise of a quality neighborhood school for all kids, a walk away from home. Thank you.
To invite Robert Specht to come up to the podium to share a few of his views. And before everybody leaves, there's going to be a raffle for those of you who have stayed till the end. So please hang on. If you did not get a raffle ticket, come up here and you've got one. Robert?
All right, 35 minutes. Here we go. What do you, 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay. Look at there. Somebody's got the plaques on over there. So, some of you know me, some of you don't. I am a parent in Northwest Denver. I've been here for about 15 years. My 2 children are over here. They are in Denver Public Schools, and the trajectory here is that they will stay in Denver Public Schools and graduate ideally from North High. So we'll see how that goes. I think they're up to the challenge. North's getting some pretty high marks these days, so looking forward to that. You know, a lot of people have asked me, why am I standing here right now? How did I get into this journey? You know, we've heard a lot of discussion tonight, back and forth. You know, to me, it comes down to 3 fundamental things. You know, ultimately, teamwork, teachers, and testing. Those are the biggest things that have started to really drive me a little bit nuts about DPS these days. I'm definitely coming at this from an involved parent's position. I've worked, like these folks here as well, with the board, in the board's face, in Tom's face, repeatedly, trying to get done what I felt strongly needed to be done. And my community was really driving me to try to make these changes happen. So, I've worked with these folks. I've got their cell phone numbers in my pocket. We do talk. It can't be 5 minutes. I just can't be. So, it got to a point, I think, in the beginning of this year, and it was referenced here earlier, we'd gotten to a point where things really were just going in this direction, and my community and myself really felt they needed to be going this direction. I'll give you a couple of stats. Number one stat is Jefferson County. Anybody heard of Jefferson County in here? I've had people come up to me and say, please don't let what is happening in Jefferson County happen here. And one of the biggest things is they say, well, guess what? 15 schools out of both these districts are about the same size. They have 15 schools that have actually been privatized up in Jefferson County, and out of about 160 programs. And with the 11 that were approved just this June, okay, we're now at 71 privatized schools in Denver. So, I know some people are on one side of this debate and some people are on the other. The reality is, if elected, there are plenty of these privatized schools in the DPS system at this point in time. 71 out of 160, I think we're good, okay? The board is clicking these out, and my incumbent opponent, who, if you could imagine a lectern here that's empty, there would be my opponent standing here, but she's not here. She couldn't make it for an unknown reason, invited many times, okay? So, again, another problem, right? But, we will click out 10 of these per year, okay, for the next 10 years. And at 10 a year, do the math, right? We're at 71, you do 10 more, you basically have 100% outsourced your education. The state of Washington actually ruled at the Supreme Court level that it's actually unconstitutional in the state of Washington to privatize education. So to think that this is not a controversial topic is a very controversial topic, okay? And I think it's just something that we need to really think deeply about, okay? Full disclosure, I'm not the only Speth running for public office. My daughter is actually running for treasurer, so I don't want that to come up in like an ethics review that we didn't fully disclose that, okay? So that's happening. Speaking of ethics, my competitor is actually under an extended ethics review. I actually went to a meeting to determine, she'd just been appointed actually by the mayor to be the head of parks. And head of Parks and Rec in Denver, which is a wonderful job. And at the same time, the ethical question was, should we be concentrating power in the city of Denver with so few high-level positions into so few hands, okay? And the question is, should my opponent be both the head of the DPS school board and on the board, and also on Parks and Rec? I have a very strong opinion on this. The Ethics Review Committee wanted to hear about this as well and review it and think about it. I made it to this meeting. One of our journalists made it to that meeting. The Denver Post made it to that meeting. A whole bunch of people made it to that meeting, including the Ethics Review Board. My opponent did not make it to that meeting, okay, to her own ethics review meeting. I really struggle with this. I know I'm getting the hook. I'm going to rattle through these. Teamwork, teachers, testing, okay? Teamwork, community needs to be more involved. They're not. Teachers, we need pro teachers. We need School of Education educated teachers, and we need them to be here for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. These are the people that will make the things happen that we need to have happen here, okay? And testing, my kids, by the time they graduate, will spend, get ready, an entire school year just taking standardized testing. They will spend an entire school year taking standardized testing. Not all the other tests, just the standardized tests, okay? It's crazy. All right, so on that note, I am absolutely asking for your vote. I will represent the communities that I will be elected to represent, which is the entire city of Denver. So please let folks know that I'm out there. I'm a late entrant, but I'm in it to win it, make no doubt about it. Thank you very much.